Hi everybody, Chapter 17, Reunion in Honolulu. When the Franklin entered port at Honolulu in October of 1848, Manjiro immediately went to see Dr. Judd. After they exchanged greetings and talked about the Franklin's voyage, Dr. Judd said, "Captain Whitfield looked fit when he was in Honolulu 11 months ago." "I'm pleased to hear that," Manjiro said. "I know he will be happy he can go home and see his William Henry. He is a smart child and everything is funny to him." Dr. Judd smiled and nodded. "Dr. Judd," Manjiro said then, "I am most anxious to see my friends. Can you tell me where to find them?" After a moment's hesitation, Dr. Judd said, "I know only where you can find Toromon." Explaining as he drew, he sketched a map and then said, "I recall that I was no more than courteous when you and the others first came to Honolulu. I apologize. It was not really you five with whom I was upset." Manjiro nodded. "Captain Whitfield told me about your friend who escaped from Japan, then took his life. I expect he believed he had dishonored his family, including his ancestors," Dr. Judd said, "and he felt that he had offended the soul of Japan." He shrugged. "I didn't understand then, and I don't now. Nor do I understand Japan's isolationist attitude." His expression softened and his eyes became sad. He looked at Manjiro as if he were about to tell him something. Manjiro could see him change his mind. All he said was, "Please give Toromon my regards." Toromon lived outside Honolulu and worked as a carpenter's apprentice. When Manjiro arrived at the small house, the two men hugged and laughed and wept. "Where are the others?" Manjiro wondered. Something was wrong. "Sit and rest," Toromon said. "I will make tea." Toromon spoke in the Tosa dialect, and it sounded good to Manjiro's ears. Gently he said, "Tell me, and speak slowly, Toromon." Toromon's face crumpled. "Jasuke is dead." Manjiro felt more than heard the cry that came from somewhere inside him. "It was the old wound to his foot. It became very bad and poisoned his body," Toromon said. "The generous people of Honolulu, indeed the people of all the island of Oahu, including the Queen herself, spared no expense. He received the best of treatment, but I do not know whether he wanted to live longer. Always he suffered, and always he was homesick. His last words were, 'I may die here, but my spirit will go back to my own country.'" Toromon picked up a piece of wood from which the figure of a duck, no, a goose, was emerging, and started carving. "It's a nene, a Hawaiian goose." After a pause, he said, "Fudonojo has changed his name to Denzo." Manjiro nodded. It was not unusual for Nihonjin to change their names, sometimes for easier pronunciation, sometimes because they simply liked another name better. But since Manjiro had not been here to make a gradual adjustment to the new name, his friend would always be Fudonojo to him. "Denzo and Gomen are not here," Toromon said. Questions rushed into Manjiro's mind, but he kept his silence. He must let Toromon tell him in his own way. Toromon blew wood dust off the carving. They had no reason to be discontent here. Mr. Judd gave them work in his home until they found a better opportunity. We will get back to that. Now I will tell you how it came that Denzo and Gomen left. A Mr. Cox, captain of the Colorado, a merchant ship, was en route to China. That was last November, almost a year ago. Captain Whitfield was here at the time. It turned out that Captain Whitfield knew this Captain Cox, and Captain Whitfield knew how much we wanted to go home. Manjiro drew in his breath. Fudonojo and Gomen had gone home, but Toromon had not gone with them, and there had been an almost imperceptible pause, a slight change of expression when he reached the "we" in the last statement. Toromon put his carving down and continued to talk while he made the tea. Captain Whitfield spoke with Captain Cox, and Cox agreed to let Denzo and Gomen work their passage on the Colorado. Captain Whitfield brought suits and shoes for them. He gave them all the silver he could spare. Dr. Judd and Chaplain Damon and others gave them farewell gifts. Toromon hesitated again. There has been no word of them since. Bringing the tea and coconut cookies, he added, "I didn't trust that Captain Cox. I had heard that he was a dog. I told Gomen and Denzo that the man was only using them, that they would have to work like devils for their passage." Sweet, scented air and muted music floated through the open windows. "But Captain Whitfield made arrangements for them to go?" Manjiro asked. "Captain Whitfield would not make arrangements for Fudonojo and Gomen to sail with a captain who was a dog." "Yes. This Captain Cox promised Captain Whitfield to look after them." After a moment, Manjiro said, "You like carpentry work?" "Hi, I like it." And Toromon had been drawn to this island from the start, Manjiro remembered. But how could it be that Toromon did not want to return home? Maybe he was wrong. Maybe Toromon truly had some good reason for not trusting Captain Cox. "I was surprised that Gomen went," Toromon said. "He had been seeing a Christian girl." He hesitated and then added, "He was converted to the Christian religion." Manjiro started to tell Toromon about the church he went to in Fairhaven, about his belief that God had created all and therefore cared about all. He changed his mind. It might start a discussion that led to disagreement, so he only nodded. "Let us not talk any more tonight," Toromon said. "Tomorrow we will talk, and I will introduce you to some of my friends." Manjiro had been with Toromon for 28 days when the carpenter he worked for came hurrying from the town. "I've seen a sailor who was on board the Colorado," he said. "It is in port. The sailor said Denzo and Gomen are still on board." Manjiro and Toromon rushed to the harbor. It was true. Fudonojo and Gomen, exhausted and sad, were back. When they had eaten and rested, they told their story. After several months at sea, Captain Cox had gone ashore with them on what he considered a safe stretch of Japan's northernmost island, Yezo, Hokkaido. There was only one house in sight, Fudenojo said. After calling and calling, we went inside. They had left all their belongings, even their sandals and raincoats. It was obvious they had spotted the ship and seen us coming and fled. Goman picked up the story. We spent all night sitting on the hillside. Captain Cox stayed with us. We knew there must be other houses farther inland. We built a fire both to keep us warm and so the people could see us on the hillside, but no one came. Fudenojo told how Captain Cox had refused to leave them in such a lonely, desolate place, reminded them that he had promised Captain Whitfield to look after them. He probably picked out a lonely, desolate island to take you ashore, Tormund said. He didn't want to lose 2 good, unpaid hands for the rest of his trip. You do him an injustice, I think, Fudenojo said quietly. That night, Manjiro dreamed that he was in the water, swimming, fighting the waves. He could see the rocky shore at Shikoku, but although he swam and swam, he could not reach the shore. His own voice, calling out for someone to help him get home, awakened him. I'm sorry, he said when he realized that he had also awakened Fudenojo. He did not explain that seeing his friends had made him almost unbearably homesick and had brought on the dream. During his stay in Hawaii, Manjiro talked with many people. Among them was Reverend Samuel C. Damon, the Seaman's Chapel, and editor of The Friend, a newspaper devoted to sailing men and their ships. A letter from Captain Whitfield, who is still at sea, has just arrived, Chaplain Damon said. Fearing that Captain Whitfield's letter would say he never wanted to see him again, Manjiro nervously opened the envelope. As he read, he relaxed. The captain's letter was warm. Amelet had written to him to say that she encouraged John to accept Captain Davis's offer. The captain wrote that he realized that he had not wanted to accept that his son was a man grown, a man who had to make his own decisions. Manjiro lingered over the line, I am proud of you, John. The letter also passed on Amelin's report about William Henry, the clever things he said. Then the captain told about his own whaling trip, how many barrels of oil they had, and said that he might have to cut the trip short because the ship was leaky. When he had read the letter for the 3rd time, Manjiro wrote to Captain Whitfield and told about Fudenojo and Goman's return. He wrote how much he missed William Henry, then went into some detail about his hope to open a trading post on one of the Luchu Islands. I will see that he receives it, Captain Damon said. He agreed that a supply post on one of the Ryukyu Islands was much needed. I think you set yourself a difficult, if not impossible task, John, he said, but I will help in any way I can. When you're ready, we'll ask through The Friend for donations of equipment you need. America has done much for me, Manjiro said. This supply post will be my gift to America. He also talked with the officers from English ships and to officers from other countries who could speak English. That included conversation with a Dutch officer who was a little drunk. My countrymen on Deshima have Japanese servants, you know, the Dutch officer said. Of course, the servants mock my countrymen. They think we Dutch are stupid clowns. Your countrymen are far from stupid, Manjiro said. It is the Japanese government that is stupid. Well, well, the Dutch officer said. Here is a Nippon who has seen the light. With prompting, the Dutchman told all he knew about what was going on inside Japan. When Manjiro put together the information he had gathered from various sources, he knew beyond doubt that there was much disquiet in Japan. For a long time, the lower classes had staged uprisings that had been brutally crushed, but now a great scholar had been imprisoned because he had openly criticized Japan's system. A popular poet had been executed because his work spoke against the isolation policy. But the dissenting voices were not silenced, and the uprisings were becoming stronger. There was as well increased murmuring against the Bakufa, the Tokugawa shogunate, for its treatment of the emperor. For more than 200 years, the shoguns had kept the emperors in impoverished seclusion at Kyoto, and now Manjiro concluded people in high places wanted the circumstances befitting their emperor restored to him. When he had learned all he could and the time for the Franklin to sail drew near, he talked to his friends about their return to Japan. I know the mistakes we have made, he said, and I know what we must do. Tormund picked up the carving and the blade. Fudenojo and Goman looked at Manjiro. Although he was the navigator for a ship and gave orders to men twice his age, it took him aback for a second that Fudenojo looked to him with submissive confidence. When the time comes, we must go to a well-populated Luchu island, Manjiro said, and we must go in style with a good whaling boat and items that will intrigue the lords. Goman gasped. The lords? Aye, Manjiro said. If we are fortunate, we will quietly work with the port people to set up a trading post. In time, we will blend into the citizenry and be able to go home. But we must consider the possibility that we will be arrested. If we are, we want to appear worthy of being turned over to the high officials at Dai Nippon. It is they who are most likely to be curious about other parts of the world, and every day we stay alive will improve our chances. You will be in the greatest danger, Tormund said. You went to America of your own free will. The rest of us couldn't help it if the ship that rescued us brought us here, Goman said. Hi, Manjiro said again. He did not explain that he believed his having lived in America was actually their key to survival if they were arrested. That was why the fishermen had approached the Franklin. American ships and the people who manned them intrigued the Japanese, and if fishermen were curious, the lords would be much more so. They would want to know everything about the country at the feet of the world. Chapter 18 is called A Captain Gone Mad. It was now March of 1849, and in the 4 months since they had left Honolulu, Captain Davis's condition had grown steadily worse. Manjiro had never been more exhausted. Wearily, he went down the foredeck companionway into his quarters. He removed his outer clothing and his shoes and socks, then stretched out on his bunk and went back over the past 4 months. After wailing for a time, they had gone to Guam, where he and Issachar Aiken had asked for medical help for the captain, but when they described his symptoms to the doctor, he shook his head. He needs to be in a hospital, the doctor said, and there are no hospitals on Guam. There is one in Manila. And so they were bound for Manila in the Luzons. Manjiro and Issachar Aiken worked in 12-hour shifts, so one of them would always be on deck. Fortunately, Captain Davis spent much of his time in his cabin. When he paced the quarterdeck, one could tell that he was listening to the voices in his head, and sometimes he flew into nonsensical rages, accusing men of spying on him or stealing from his cabin. There was much tension, flaring tempers, and grumbling. Some of the veteran whalers, led by Big Jim, had asked for a meeting with Chief Aiken and Manjiro and told them they were in favor of putting Captain Davis in irons, just to keep him safe from himself, right? Manjiro put his arm over his eyes. He and Issachar were faced with an awesome dilemma. The men were close to rebellion, but the captain of the ship was like a head of the country. To take command away from him could lead to imprisonment or hanging. A tap sounded on the door, and Manjiro thought, "Go away, let me rest." But aloud, he said, "Enter." The cook's helper, a boy named Grant, pushed the door open. Manjiro swung his legs over the side of the bed. Something was wrong. The boy was pale, his eyes round with fear. "It's the captain, sir. He's got a harpoon in one hand and a pistol in the other, and he says the men saying they're going to kill him." "Where is he?" "He's backed up against the bulwarks close to where the anchors be." "Who's there?" "Mr. Wang." "The old Chinese sailmaker. No help." "And Steve Rossett, Mr. Aiken, and Big Jim." "Big Jim. Good." "The scuttle side? Is it open?" "Yes, sir. When I went to see what's happening, I was in such a hurry to get back down." "Stay here," Manjiro said. Barefoot he ran on through the scullery, then up the forecastle companionway. Silently he slipped out onto the deck, praying that Big Jim and the other men would know he was there, but would not give away his presence. His voice wouldn't sound like Captain Whitfield's, but he knew the words and the tone, and every man who had ever sailed with Captain Whitfield responded to them. His mouth was dry. The horrifying thought went through his mind that his voice would come out no louder than a squeak. He moistened his lips, swallowed, and then shouted, "Avast, Ira Davis." Captain Davis jerked his head around. Big Jim leaped, grabbed the captain's right arm, and pushed it upward. The sound of the shot echoed as half a dozen other men, and they wrestled the harpoon away from him. Manjiro stood trembling, and when they had him in irons, he went back to his quarters and cried. So he didn't kill himself or kill anybody else, but he's kind of lost his mind. Chapter 19 is called A Loss. Manjiro soaked up the July warmth, the sea's calm rhythm, and the relaxed atmosphere. "After what we've been through, we deserve this," Big Jim had said, and Manjiro agreed. Before they had reached Manila, they had coped with one more nightmare, what one of the men described as the worst typhoon I had ever displeasure of dancing with. Once they had made port and taken Captain Davis to the hospital, the crew had been eager to repair the storm damage and get back to sea. Although he too had not wanted to linger, Manjiro had enjoyed the respite and had made a purchase while the Franklin was in port. He had bought a parrot for William Henry. Imagining William Henry's face when he saw the parrot, Manjiro laughed to himself. "Sail ho, starboard of the bow," came a call from the man perched on a foremost yard. Along with Captain Aiken, Manjiro watched the ship approach. He put the spyglass to his eye. "It is Captain Woodard of New Bedford. He is a friend of Captain Whitfield's." "Then it is you he wants to see," Captain Aiken said. When we speak her, go over and make the gam with him, and I'll stay on board." Using slang. "Thank you," Manjiro said. According to protocol, the captains visited on one ship and the officers on the other. When Manjiro stood on the quarterdeck with Captain Woodard, the captain said, "I had hoped we'd meet." The expression on Captain Woodard's craggy face alarmed Manjiro. "You have news of Captain Whitfield?" "Aye, I do. His ship was leaky, and he had to come home." Manjiro blew out a relieved breath. It was bad to have a leaky ship and have to return home before you filled enough barrels, but he had thought it might be worse news. "And how are Amelin and my William Henry? He is a big boy now, I am sure." Manjiro laughed. "In Guam, I bought for him a beautiful parrot. Already the parrot can say hello, and I will teach it many more words before we reach home port." "John," Captain Woodard said, "I don't know how to soften this. William Henry died of pneumonia back in the winter." Oh my gosh. So sad. The Franklin at last arrived home in August 1849. Manjiro stood on the quarterdeck as the helmsman maneuvered the ship into port. How good it was to be back in Fairhaven. But his heart was heavy, and he felt older than his 22 years. He could not even smile, much less dance and cheer like the other men. For a few minutes after the men had walked on shore, he stood watching the joyful, tearful reunions. He pictured William Henry as he would have looked now, a 4-year-old with a bright, inquisitive face and a smile that would move the most jaded heart. He turned away, helped Captain Aiken with the final details, then hefted his sea chest onto his shoulder. He had just stepped onto the ground when he saw Captain Whitfield coming toward him. Manjiro put the chest down. For a moment they stood looking at each other. Then Captain Whitfield came forward and folded his arms around Manjiro. When they were on their way home in the carriage, Captain Whitfield said, "John, the letter you sent after Captain Woodard told you about William Henry's death was a great comfort to Amelin and me. We read it over and over. Your love for William Henry and for us helped more than you can know." They rode in silence for a time. Manjiro listened to the clop-clop of the horses' hooves, filled his eyes with the beauty of trees. "I was sorry to hear about Ira Davis," Captain Whitfield said at last. "It was very bad," Manjiro said. But let us get on to more pleasant things, John. I'm very proud of you. I understand that when the crew voted for a new captain, you lost by only 2 votes. Manjiro squirmed. Yes, I was most surprised. That was an understatement. When his name had been, as the men termed it, put in the hat, he had been embarrassed. It seemed to him that Issachar Aiken would automatically take over as captain. But even Issachar had said no, that it was not done that way, that the men voted. But becoming the chief mate was not bad at all, Captain Whitfield said. Am I right so far? Manjiro laughed. Whaling men are good mail service. The horses moved along at an easy gait, and Manjiro thought Captain Whitfield was as pleased as he to have his time when there were just the 2 of them. Those times had been few from the day Captain Whitfield had rescued him and his friends. I also heard about the storm that hit you before you reached Manila, Captain Whitfield said. It was a bad one, the worst I'd ever been in, Manjiro said. And it has not been for your superior navigation, I am told the Franklin might not have made it. Manjiro realized that his palms were sweating. You've had nightmares about it, Captain Whitfield asked. Manjiro hesitated. Thinking they were a weakness in him, he had told no one about the nightmares. There was always fear of the storm itself, but he had not panicked since the time when he climbed with Jake. It was after the typhoon, when the crew cheered him, that he had begun to shake. The nightmares, he said, are most strange. I am making mistakes. I can't do anything right, and all are going to die because of me. But when the storm was actually happening, I did not have such thoughts. Sitting at ease with the reins loose in his hands, the captain glanced over at him. They were here, he said. You were just too busy to notice them. That's why they came out later in the form of nightmares. Speaking of the typhoon, and the nightmares had relieved the tension inside Manjiro, he leaned forward. The rich late summer smell of the farm saturated the air. They were almost there. How is Hickory? Hickory's gotten fat and lazy. He needs exercise. John, Amelin had a quiet dinner planned for you this weekend. I understand that a certain young lady, Nell Adams, will be among the guests. She is not married, and she's very pretty. Amelin was behind the matchmaking, Manjiro thought, but Captain Whitfield was also promoting it. He and Nell had enjoyed some good discussions when they went to Bartlett's Academy. They had even exchanged a few kisses. But he would have no time for such friendships now. He already knew what he was going to do after his visit with Captain Whitfield and Amelin. Tonight, Manjiro said, there will be just we 3. His voice broke. A shadow crossed Captain Whitfield's face. John, you were there when William Henry was born, he said. I was there when he died. In the short time on earth, he was loved by a wonderful woman and 2 good men. For a while, Manjiro thought those 2 men and the wonderful woman would sit and talk and console each other, but it would not be for very long. Every whaler on the sea knew that California had won independence from Mexico and was occupied by United States forces, and that its mountains were heavy with gold. Manjiro's part of the profits from the Franklin's trip would come to more than $350. That was a lot of money, but it was not enough to take Fudonojo, Gomen, Toman, and him to Aluchu Island in style. And that's the end of chapters 17 through 19 in Born in the Year of Courage.